Welcome to Alternative Dog Moms Podcast. I'm Kimberly Gauthier, the creator of Keep the Tail Wagging. For the past 9 years, I've been blogging about raw feeding, pet wellness, and life as a crazy dog mom. I've seen massive improvements in my dog's health since I started raising my dogs naturally, and I'm passionate about sharing my experience to help other pet parents.
I'm Erin Scott. For the past 9 years, I've been researching and learning everything I can about healing cancer, allergies, autoimmune, and mystery illnesses in both my dogs and myself. And I can't wait to share with you everything I've learned on this journey. As the Alternative Dog Moms, we're bringing you all the latest dog health news that we're following and sharing the tips, tricks, and resources we learn along the way. Now, let's get started. Hello, Kimberly.
Hello, Erin. How's it going?
I'm doing good. It's a beautiful summer day here for a change. It's not 100 degrees.
We went up to the low 80s this past weekend,
Nice.
It was not nice for us, but we survived. I had broke out the AC unit for one day and I was thinking of you the entire time because it's like I just would not be. I'm not a good fit for any other state except for Washington State.
Well, we have a guest from Canada on with us today. We have Dr. Jeff Grognet, and he's out on the West Coast too. So welcome, Dr. Jeff.
Hello, Erin and Kimberly. Yeah, I'm just a little bit farther north than you are, Kimberly. So and right on the coast. So
so you have nice, cool weather.
Yes, we do. Yeah, so far anyway.
Yeah.
My humid mid-Atlanticness is very jealous. So, Dr. Jeff, we're excited to have you with us. And we always love starting off with a good origin story. So, can you tell us how long it was that you decided you wanted to be a vet and how you got into this more holistic side of things?
How long have we got? Okay, so I've give you an idea. I decided I wanted to be a veterinarian when I was 14 years old. So way back in the dark ages, well before you two were even thought of. And so the key is that I started doing that. And I don't know if you know these books, James Herriot books. I started reading those, and that's from that series, the James Herriot series. But anyway, I became a veterinarian. And the thing you're probably more interested in is what changed me from being, as I call, conventional veterinarian to going into the holistic world.
Yeah.
And the thing is, every veterinarian goes through vet school, obviously. And when they go through, they're trained in the conventional methods. And back when I went through vet school, and I'll tell you right now, I've been a veterinarian for 41 years. But back in the dark ages, our nutrition course consisted of, for dogs and cats, an hour. That was a whole hour. That was because they didn't have any other time to slot it in. We learned more about cattle and pigs and chickens and things like that, but because they had economic value. But with dogs and cats, we got a whole hour, and easy to sum up. At the end of the class, okay, what food do we recommend? One that's complete and balanced. Example, Purina dog chow. There you go. Okay. And so that was what we were pushed. The other side is veterinarians were also told back in those days, do not supplement that diet. Don't add anything to it because you're going to mess up the balance.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's what I graduated with. And so, and unfortunately, all the education, even back then, was created and pushed by the pet food manufacturing companies. At that point, it was Hills, period. And then Iams got into it and a bit more Purina, that type of thing. But Hills was the cornerstone, and they had the book on nutrition. So that is what veterinarians learned. So the thing that happened, of course, is I got into practice and I started saying, okay, what's the best food? Well, by then, we had prescription foods that were better than the regular ones. And so that's what I had my first dog on. And anyway, the thing that happened is that I had a rep come in from another company, not one of the big ones, and they said, hey, our food is a little bit better. And of course, it wasn't one that vets sold. It went through pet stores. And so I said, well, I'm going to try it. I did. And the thing that really became apparent is that after a couple of months, my dog, which was a lab pit bull cross called Courtney, her hair coat looked a little bit glossier. And also, she just seemed to have a little bit more energy. It's like, oh, and this is a big thing for vets, like in the position I was in. Nutrition really does matter.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I moved to an even better food, which meant more expensive. And I saw another change. And then that led me to, I wonder what I can do. And so back at that point, I was actually cooking for my dog. I was creating homemade food. And it was really hard back then because we didn't have recipes to follow. And we didn't have the internet. I'm going back to the 80s here. And so you're reliant on books that were written by radical veterinarians. And anyway, the thing is, I got into doing that. And the thing is, Courtney thrived and she loved the food. And that was the big impetus for me to keep going on it. And now you move to me present day. The way I suggest with feeding is that two things. One is let's get them off the commercial food because of all, and I'm sure you guys have covered the dangers of that and the problems and things like that. But the other side is my thing is I just want to help these dogs and cats. So what I suggest is, hey, let's create a food that you can make. And either you're, using raw, you're using a crock pot, you're doing a combination of all the above, whatever. The point is, you're not feeding the commercial, and you're getting the benefits of a food that you're designing or has been designed by somebody with their health in mind. And as I put it, they thrive on the food rather than just surviving on the conventional commercial food that's usually supplied by veterinarians.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's sort of where I went. And you can imagine when I started doing that, the veterinarians around, because I was actually back in the 80s and back in the 90s, veterinarians actually still got together for like regional meetings and for education. And then they found out that, oh, Dr. Jeff is suggesting raw food. And that was pretty well a case of being ostracized, and the vets didn't want to talk to me anymore. And I was considered pretty darn weird. Okay. And so that was the thing we had, and that is we didn't have any support. Thankfully, I practiced with my wife. Louise is a veterinarian. And so because of that, we were able to support each other and sort of say, hey, what's working for you? Hey, and go back and forth. Without that, and without I don't know if you know the American Holistic Veterinary Medical Association, we wouldn't have gotten very far on this at all. And so you've got to have an inquiring mind, and you've got to be determined to try to figure it out. And that's the same thing with pet owners, because if you've got a dog, you've got a cat, and you're going seeing a conventional vet, and you mention the fact that you like to create your own food, you don't get much support.
Yeah, their heads explode.
Yeah, their heads explode. They start looking at the book, and then they open the door for you to leave. But yeah, the point is that you don't get much support in that way, which is really unfortunate. And that was the impetus for me, because now I'm into education. I have a nutrition course. I teach on lots of topics. But the point is that the key is anyone should get the information. And I wouldn't rely just on the internet, because some of the stuff there's two things. Some of the stuff isn't correct. But the other side is a lot of places that are talking about feeding are trying to sell their product as well.
Yeah.
Which is fine, but it becomes biased.
Yeah. Well, one thing I found is people who are selling a product, they don't seem to be able to sell their product without tearing down others. It's like there's one thing to educate people. Like, for instance, if you're telling people kibble isn't ideal and you explain why kibble isn't ideal. But what I've seen over the past, 5-6 years is going to these, quote unquote, fresh food type of sites, and they will have an area. So if it's a cooked food, they're going to tell you why raw is bad and why their food is better. If it's a raw food, they're going to tell you why cooked, your dog isn't getting all the nutrients. If it's like a
HPP
vitamin mix or something or some type of, base mix to help you balance a diet, they're going to tell you that all commercial raw diets aren't really balanced. So this is why you need our product. And that's so confusing for the average dog owner because they don't know who to believe and they don't know what's right. And if you don't have a veterinarian who is supporting your choice to try and do better, it's just, I'll just won't do anything then. I'll just go back to the kibble and just whatever.
Yeah. It's a lot simpler. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The thing you have to keep in mind, this is very important. Every animal, just like every human, is different. And that is, as I was called by, I had a technician who worked for me who was a vegetarian, and so we had a real good thing going. She was a vegetarian. She called me an unevolved meat eater, and the point being is that I went vegetarian. And at the end of it, it was after a year, it was like people were looking at me going, "Are you okay?" Because I'd lost so much weight, and I was feeling good. I ran a marathon doing that, by the way. But the point is, when you looked at me, it's kind of like, gee, my cheeks were sort of sucked in, and it kind of didn't look radiant in that sense. But the point is that every person and every dog and every cat is different in some ways. And the best example is my current dog, Shay. Shay's a border collie. And the thing about him is that he has severe food allergies. So if you're telling me about raw food that has chicken in, that's going to give him diarrhea and you make him really itchy, right? So the point is you have to cater it to the animal and you have to watch what the animal's doing and see how they're feeling, how much energy they have, how's their hair coat, are they feeling healthy? And that's the key. You've got to be ready to shift. And the way I put it is, I don't think there's any diet that you can make that is completely wrong. Certainly you can have some that are unbalanced and you've got to do your research on that. But the point is you can create diets that are fully cooked, ones that are fully raw, and for that particular dog, it'll work. Okay. And that's where you need the support. That's where you need the help.
Hey, quick question for you. Are you someone who wants to be fit, healthy, and happy? And what if I told you could get your dream body by simply just listening to a podcast? I'm Josh.
And I'm KG, and we're the hosts of the Fit, Healthy, and Happy podcast.
Listen, we get it. Fitness isn't easy. Carbs, no carbs.
Just stop, okay? It doesn't have to be that complicated. And that's why we made this podcast. We get straight to the facts so you can become your best you.
So the way to check us out is click the link in the show notes or search Fit, Healthy, and Happy podcast on any of the major podcast platforms. We'll see you soon.
Yeah, Kimberly knows a couple years ago, my husband and I tried a keto diet and he thrived on it, but I really struggled with it. And it turns out like I need a little bit more carbs in my life to really thrive than he did. It was wonderful for him because he stopped getting hangry. He stopped having like mood swings and things. So, it was just so interesting because there is no one size fits all. And I feel like we have to accept that there's a certain level of experimentation maybe needed to see, let's try this and see how our dog does. And I think that's okay.
Yeah, that's what I encourage people to do. It's often because I like to share recipes. A friend of mine emptied out her freezer from last year's salmon catches. Her husband goes fishing and he was going fishing again. And this was salmon they hadn't eaten. So she gave it to me. And so I've been thawing and slicing up salmon strips to make dog treats for 2 weeks now because it's a lot of salmon. And, whenever I share a recipe, there's going to be someone who wants to know exactly what I did and how long and what the temperature. And I'm just sort of like, with everything that I do with my dogs, I just kind of wing it. I feel like I get the foundation is there. But sometimes, like when I'm making meal prep, sometimes I'm using lamb organs, sometimes I'm using pork organs, sometimes I'm using beef organs. It depends on what I have in my freezer and what I've thought out. And then I'm mixing everything together. And I try to encourage people, the reason why I'm at this place today, more than 10 years after I started feeding raw, is because, I know my dogs and I know what they do well on. And I did a lot of trial and error over the years to get here. But we live in a world where everything is packaged and delivered to us as, you do a cup of this and a teaspoon of this. And people cannot let go of that mindset. Like you can talk to them and say, when I'm explaining to people why I feed raw, one of the reasons is that this is biologically appropriate. This is species appropriate. And we talk about, the gray wolf. And no, I do not think my dog is a wolf, but, I take inspiration from the gray wolf, from wild. What would my dogs do in the wild? When I'm letting my dogs just roam our property, what are they doing? And how can I honor that nature? And I don't think my dogs would be eating a quote unquote balanced diet on a daily basis. So I choose to balance over time. And still people are like, but how many cups do you need to, and it's just, and it's, I get it. It's such a mind shift to try and get to be able to feed your dogs when we have an entire industry telling us that this is wrong.
Yeah. And that is something that I've been working with. That's the question I get a lot. And that is, hey, you're suggesting this diet, but what's the calcium level? Right.
Yeah.
And the problem is veterinarians are told by the pet food manufacturers that, if you get the calcium and phosphorus levels wrong, you're going to kill your dog. Mm-hmm. Okay. And that attitude is pushed forward. And here's the complete opposite for you. Dermatologists, and this is veterinary dermatologists, when they're doing an elimination diet for allergies, one that was popular years ago was pork and pinto beans, the two P's, okay? And the idea being you fed 50% pork and it was cooked, and 50% pinto beans cooked, and that was their diet. The idea being is that they probably never had that before, so you can really test them to see if they've got an allergy and see if they'll tolerate that food. The dermatologist did not look at balancing that diet. And what they're saying is we should go 3 months on this thing. It's like, yeah, but are they going to die before then? No, they're not. And that's the point. So, and I don't eat my food every day thinking of, I wonder what my calcium level is in my food today, and what protein percentage have I really got? And do I have enough omega-3s? Mm-hmm. Like all that stuff, right? It's a question of, vary the diet. Make sure you've got sort of the basics in there, okay? And I'm sure if you're providing a raw food, does it have bone? If it doesn't have bone, how are you going to make up for it? That's it. That's all you have to do. You don't have to overthink this stuff. And people do, as you say, Kimberly, people want the recipe, and they've got to get it so exact. And so, unfortunately, they go down that road thinking, if I can't get this, I won't do it right. Therefore, I better not do it.
Yeah. And sadly, I'm seeing a lot of people in the raw feeding community, because when I started, that's how I learned. It's like, it's not that deep. You're going to be fine. You're not going to kill your dog, and that's kind of where I go back to anytime I start overthinking something. But today, with people who are learning to feed raw, they're being told the opposite. Somehow the lexicon of the kibble industry has entered the raw feeding world, where now people are talking about, well, is that complete and balanced? And people are wanting to know the nutrient breakdown of what you're adding to your dog's diet. And some of the questions that I have gotten from people and I'll just honestly say, I don't know. I don't think of it that way, because it's sort of like, where are you getting this? And when did we start over analyzing and wanting the nutrient breakdown? Because I guarantee these people aren't doing this for themselves, but somehow this has become part of what we're doing. And it's just another way. And I know it's not intentional, but it's another way of keeping people from trying something new, because they're listening to these people speak in this elevated scientific way about feeding their dogs. And they're like, yeah, I don't understand that. That seems very complicated. I'm just going to feed the kibble I hear the arguments. Dogs have been surviving on kibble for 100 years. They'll be fine. My grandparents' dogs used to live until they were 25 years old. And so I'm going to continue feeding kibble. And it's just sort of like, I think people mean well. I love that people are educating themselves, but there has to be some type of balance between educating yourself, but not scaring the bejeebus out of people who just want to feed their dogs a healthier diet.
Yeah. Yeah. And something simple for people that are just thinking about going alternative at all, and they're putting the dry food in the bowl. What I always tell them is, okay, start by just adding some meat to that. And the question comes up probably half the time is, well, isn't that going to mess up the balance?
Yes.
And my answer to that is that, very simply, the balance that's being created by the pet food manufacturers is based on minimal levels. So for dogs, it's roughly 20%. Cats is 30% protein, right? And dogs that go out in the wild and go to Yellowstone Park and pull down an elk, they're eating meat that's about 65% protein. Oh my God, they're unbalanced. They should be all dead right now. But something's working, right? And so the point is, you've got all that leeway. And the other side is, and this is from my experience, is that you can start with that 20% protein in a commercial dry kibble. We can add meat to it, and guess what? Their health improves. Okay? Yeah. So it's not that you've thrown it off balance, you've actually improved it. Yeah. And so that is the thing that's really hard for a lot of veterinarians to appreciate. And that is their mantra is that, well, the company says this food is balanced, period. And the same thing, we saw the wars between the companies, because when the higher protein kibble came out, that was regarded by the lower protein kibble guys as poisonous. It's going to kill all the kidneys in dogs and cats. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And no, it didn't. Yeah. So, okay. But that was my experience with the nutrition, and the point is, when everyone's feeding, if everyone's feeding commercial food, my line is, we can do better than that. And that's what we want to do. We just want to try and make it so we've got healthier animals. The ones that are fed homemade food, raw or cooked, didn't come in to see me as often as the ones that were on kibble.
Right.
Pure and simple. They save money. Okay. So that's the real thing that we need to illustrate to people. And that is, you're going to have a healthier kid in front of you by doing that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What other topics do you want to get into, guys?
Well, I've heard you on a couple of these summits lately talking about vaccines, and I'm just always so interested. There's so much, again, confusion, and you hear so many different stories of, well, you should get the, certain things as a puppy, or do they really need them only once? Do we need them is 3 years good? Is 3 years bad? So I was curious just to get your thoughts on how we should navigate that vaccine question when we have vets who are telling us now.
Okay. Here's I'm going to go back 41 years right now, and as to what I learned in vet school, because this applies directly to this. Okay. There's two classes that I had that shine on this. One is we had an immunology class. So that was all about immune system. How does it respond? And that type of thing. And then the other one, of course, was, we call it small animal medicine. Okay. Which would incorporate vaccines. Okay. So here's the conundrum. I had professors who were telling me that the Parvo vaccine, which had only come out 2 years before I graduated, they said the Parvo vaccine is really, really good. And so the immunologists are saying, because it's Parvo, and this is parvovirus in dogs, panleukopenia in cats, which is a parvovirus, both of those, when they get a successful immunization, it's good for life. I thought, wow, that's really something. Okay. And then we went to this small animal medicine class, and they said, oh, okay, we're going to review vaccines and what you should be doing. And, oh, the distemper and parvo, you need to do that every year. Oh, okay. Well, the other guys just said it's good for a lifetime. He goes, yeah, no. But we know the vaccine manufacturers tell us it's only good for a year. So there you go. So that's how I graduated. So we were told it's tradition. You should be doing it. The rabies vaccine was given every year. In 1983, that was the first 3-year rabies vaccine.
Oh, wow.
Okay, the one called IMRAB that you probably do know. But anyway, the point is that every veterinarian back then was taught that vaccines are good for a year. And the way we were taught was that at a year's time, the immunity starts to go down. So if you put a graph on the board and you see the antibody level dropping, it gets getting down to critical level, and we've got to boost it and get the level back up again. So that was the theory. Back in the 1990s, all of a sudden there was concern. And that is, gee, vaccines may not be harmless. And the reason that came up was because of cats. And they had linked tumors called a feline fibrosarcoma to the injection of a vaccine. So it's kind of like, oh, okay, so vaccines aren't totally harmless. What that turned out to be later on is that they called it vaccine-associated fibrosarcoma, but then it got changed to injection-associated feline fibrosarcoma because any injection can create that in a cat. But the point is, having multiple vaccine injections is a trigger for it. Okay, so anyway, that happened in cats. A year later, the American Animal Hospital Association said, we should probably do that in dogs too. And they moved that to a 3-year. There was a lot of resistance to that. Okay, and so what happened was then the veterinary profession sort of got divided on those that were traditional, that's saying, no, we know it's good for a year, we're going to keep going annually. And there's a real fear back then by a lot of vets that said, well, if we don't get the people in every year, they're not going to turn up. Okay. And so with that in mind, some kept on the 1 year. Interestingly, I went the totally opposite route, and that is I read the guidelines, and the guidelines suggested, and this is the key, they still do, they suggested that the dogs should be given the core vaccines at a minimum every 3 years. In other words, 3 years or longer. Okay. So 3 years isn't the time. Okay. So, and a lot of vets do follow that. But it also said in the micro print of the same guidelines, it actually said that the canine distemper and parvovirus are good for 9 years.
Wow.
And that most veterinarians never went to that detail to read that. But I did. And then there was 1 year, and it wasn't the American Animal Hospital Association, it was the World Small Animal Vet Association that came out with them that said, we know it's good for 9 years, and possibly a lifetime.
Oh, wow.
It's like, oh, I'll take that. I'll take that one. So what happened was, and this is a case of our practice really got very strange on this one. We had scientific proof that it lasted for 9 years. So we put on our vaccine certificates, if you had it this year, we'd go 9 years and say that's when it expires. Okay, we had scientific footing for that. So that was great. But the other veterinarians, if our patients went to another veterinarian, straight away they said, well, that's impossible, and they'd vaccinate the dog right off the bat. Okay. But anyway, the way that I've gone at this point, because you brought up sort of the puppy situation, Erin, this is what I suggest to puppy owners. And this is assuming they have full control of the vaccines from birth, is I would be doing, this is what I did to my dog, Shay. I do one vaccine at 16 weeks. And as long as they're not in a high-risk situation, living in a shelter, a breeding kennel, whereas Parvo is at risk type of thing, 16 weeks is fine. So you do the vaccine at 16 weeks. You do a titer a month later. And if that titer proves that they've responded to the vaccine, as in there's an antibody level that says, hey, we're immunized, guys, then that means the immune systems come online. And there's a very important concept called memory. And what that means is that when you triggered an immune response in your body, and this is the same with us, if you had a vaccine when you were a kid, that created a clone of cells that produced the antibodies to that particular vaccine, to that antigen, as we call it. And that clone never dies. It's always there. It may become inactive for a while if there's no disease challenge and no vaccine. But the point is, it's still there, resident. And we depend on that. That's what a quote, a booster is based on. And as we give a booster and that clone wakes up and says, hey, time to fight the invader, and boom, the antibody level goes high. Okay. But the main thing is we have that clone, we have that memory, that lasts a lifetime. We don't need to revaccinate that dog if we know that clone is there. And that's what the titer has told us. The other side is, and this is the confusion on titers, if you have a titer that's positive and shown that your immune system's come online and you've got those antibodies, and you make that assumption that, hey, they're there, we don't need to do any other vaccines, you also don't need to do any other titers. It doesn't matter if your level goes down to zero, or it actually never goes to zero. It goes to undetectable on the test. And there's a bit of a difference there. So the point being is that once you've proven you've got immunity, then you're okay. And it's the same thing with us. When I was a little guy, I had a vaccine, I know, for polio. There was one, and that's good for life. So why are they different from us?
Right.
Okay. There is a difference with the bacterial vaccines, and with bacteria, we're talking about the Lyme, Bordetella, Lepto, those ones. They don't produce a good immune response anywhere near the same. I don't recommend those vaccines anyway. They don't work that well. But the point is that they're different. So the lifetime thing or the 9-year thing, that is definitely the core vaccines, which is distemper and parvo.
So you had mentioned, not in if they're not in a high risk situation like shelters, and Kimberly and I are both active in the rescue and shelter world. And it's like we run into so many lovely vets a lot who volunteer their time, but man, they just want to jab everything, because they're so worried about this shelter environment. How much more is the risk when you're in that kind of environment? And how can we get this kind of thinking to go into the shelter vets?
That is going to be really hard. I did a conference last fall, which was the Shelter and Rescue Conference, a holistic shelter and rescue conference, which is really neat because we had people talking about what they do in their shelters from a holistic standpoint, feeding, vaccines, care, whatever. And the main thing that it comes down to is, what is the risk? Like you say, both of you have been involved in shelter rescue.
Yeah.
How many times have you had a case of parvo that you have been, I'll call it, in touch with?
Not me personally, but some of the shelters that I've been involved with have.
Yeah, same.
Okay. So because there's two parts here. One is, you say you've got a dog at home and you go to a shelter. Okay. And then you're worried about, is my dog at risk because I'm going to a shelter and it may pick up a disease that I bring home? Well, the only ones you're going to bring home really, well, only one. There's two: parvo or the kennel cough complex. Those two. And now here's a kicker. And this is something that people really can't wrap their head around sometimes. Okay, I vaccinated your dog at 16 weeks. We did a titer, and now it's 3 years old. And I'm telling you that immunity is good for a lifetime. Then you start volunteering at a shelter, and you have a case of parvo turn up in that shelter. Then and this is the whole mindset thing. Then you become worried and think, well, maybe I should get another vaccine for my dog because I'm worried about it now. Now, the fact that parvo is around doesn't change the immunity status of your dog.
Yeah.
You don't need to go and get another booster done. Okay. In the same way, if there was a case down the street of polio, I'm not going to go and get another polio vaccine. Right? I had it when I was a kid. I'm done. Okay. And so that's one side. In the shelter situation, unfortunately, what you're going to find is that people are really worried about it. And so what they're trying to do is to make sure that the animals have got immunity to the diseases that they can die from. And so if you're, let's say you've got an adult dog that goes into a shelter, definitely get them vaccinated, get their immunity up. And if it's a first vaccine, generally what we're talking about is it's going to take a couple of weeks for it to really take hold and produce immunity.
Yeah.
Okay. If it's a dog over 16 weeks old, very important, you do not need to do a booster on that dog because it's a modified live vaccine. It produces a robust immune response. There is no reason to do a booster. Okay. And actually, the AHA guidelines, if you go into the shelter thing, actually they've changed it again. But what they did have in there is that they expressly said that only one vaccine is required. And the way it's worded now is kind of fudgy. Okay. But the thing that happened with the vaccine guidelines from AHA, not so much the World Small Animal Vet Association, but the American Animal Hospital Association, when you read the guidelines, they've got all the logos of the vaccine companies all plastered all over them now. And before, there used to be a very independent set of vaccines. Mm. And so there is influence there. There is no doubt about it. Okay. But anyway, in a sheltering situation, when you have puppies, your concern is that, the puppies can die from parvo. First thing is you get the puppies out of the shelter. You do a foster.
Yeah,
and
that's what we do.
During that sensitive time, you just remove them from the situation. That is your best way of preventing parvo, period. And then you vaccinate them and then maybe put them back in. But if it's a lot of shelters, when they have puppies, they can get homes pretty quick. Yeah. My place, puppies don't exist here.
Yeah, we have a really robust foster system with our rescue organization.
Great.
So because we pull puppies and pregnant moms from shelters, and we actually even take back our dogs. We just took back a dog that was adopted out 6 years ago. And okay. So we take back our dogs as part of our contract. But we have had parvo, and it's usually because they contracted the parvo when they were in the rescue or in the shelter. And then it broke once we got them out. And our executive directors have a really good protocol so that we don't lose as many puppies and it's not transferred. So, so it's like if someone has parvo, they don't foster puppies for a year.
Oh, wow.
So it's just sort of like just to make sure that everything is died and gone and stuff. But we just haven't had it in so long that,
good.
I can't even remember the last time. I think we've had other things, what is it? It starts with a G, I think.
Giardia?
Yeah, Giardia. We've had Giardia. Oh, yeah. We've had kennel cough. Those are the type of things we get now. But we there was a time when we were just sort of like, what is up with parvo? It's just like good.
It seems like it goes through phases.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely it does. Yeah, and see, for parvo to exist and keep going, you need a stable population of young, unvaccinated dogs. Or you also need a wildlife reservoir, which is raccoons.
Mm.
Okay, raccoons carry canine distemper, and the situation close to where I am in Vancouver, British Columbia, there's a great big park called Stanley Park, and they have a resident raccoon population. So what happens with them is the raccoons go through, they get decimated by the parvo, so that it's a small population. And then it starts building again. And it's usually about a 7-year cycle is what they've tracked it as. And then the population builds, and then all of a sudden parvo just breaks out again. And when it does, this is how we know about it. The veterinarians that are local to that park or around it say, hey, that because parvo is showing up in the raccoons and they're dying from it, we need to revaccinate all the dogs to make sure they've got all the immunity they need. No, they don't. Okay. Yeah. And here's a similar situation. We had where I am, it's a place called Parksville, British Columbia. We had a person, and it was a young guy who contracted rabies. And they're still not sure where he got it from, but they think it was from a bat that he had an encounter with, and that's what carries rabies where we are. Okay, but the point is, he died of the rabies. And the next thing is, one of the local vets put this whole thing in the paper and got interviewed saying, we got to make sure that our dogs and cats are vaccinated for rabies now because it's more prevalent. And make sure you do a booster even earlier to make sure they've got the immunity. That's the problem. It's the panic issue.
Yeah.
It
is. I mean, and it's easy to spread. I mean, I've had someone. My dogs are vaccinated, but I do the puppy vaccines, and then I do one set, around 3 or 4 years old, and then I'm done, or 5 years old, and then I'm done. That's all they get, because that's sort of like where my veterinarian and I, it's sort of like this dance of the conversation, and it's just sort of like, yeah, this is as far as I'll go. And even with that second set of vaccines, I'm very, very conservative, because, rabies is required where I am. And although no one's coming and knocking on doors to ask us if our dogs are vaccinated, we do have some local veterinarians that will report, not so much local where I am, but in Western Washington, who will report people who refuse the vaccine, so that you're forced to, it's
interesting. Yeah. I always ponder that one. And that is, like we don't have a rabies requirement where I live, which is wonderful. But when did veterinarians get pooled in, as the sheriffs, as the police, to be able to enforce the bylaws? Yeah. They don't get paid to do that.
No.
Oh, well, maybe they do. That's another story. But anyway, the point is that there's veterinarians shouldn't be the ones who are doing that. But unfortunately, I see that here. There's a large referral hospital that you can only go in and have a cruciate ligament surgery done on your dog if it's fully vaccinated.
Yeah.
It's like, and they cannot be fed raw going into a hospital. Okay. And it's kind of like, holy moly, we've got these barriers to care.
Yeah. And you're encouraging people to lie.
You're encouraging people to lie, but the same thing is, the same thing is happening in people, and that is, especially with that little thing a few years ago, I think it was called COVID or something. But the point is, we had people that were staunchly on one side of the fence.
Yeah.
I'm for a vaccine, I'm against vaccines, right? And that had consequences. And unfortunately, we still have the same consequences in dogland.
Yeah.
As in the thing about boarding kennels and things, what they need to do is to learn about this thing called kennel cough, and they'll realize that vaccine really doesn't do much for them. It just gives them a nice warm feeling inside. Mm-hmm. But that's it.
And a lot of it is CYA. They're afraid somebody will blame them.
That's exactly it. Yeah. And what's happening is that they're not getting educated, and then they're not educating their clients either. But you can have kennel cough complex go through a kennel, fully vaccinated animals.
Yeah.
And that's it. Right. So, and actually that happened with my dog Courtney. I went to the shelter, SPCA, to actually check a dog for my sister. She was thinking about adopting a shepherd. And I went in and checked this shepherd out. And as soon as I pulled back on a leg, it's like, oh, these hips are in trouble. That's why he's here. It's a puppy. And it's like, this one's got hip dysplasia. So anyway, I went in there, and of course they got me to check a few other dogs and say hi and whatever. Meanwhile, my wife went to the cat ward. And so anyway, the next thing is I came out, and there's my dog in the car, and Courtney was all over me. Oh, you been cheating on me? Where have you been? And she was checking me out and all that stuff. And like a dumb veterinarian. I went in, played with the dogs, and came out. I did not wash my hands.
Mm.
And so she smelt it, and 3 days later, she was coughing. And at that point, she was still a very young puppy. She did have the vaccine for that. So it didn't help. But the point is, there's like 18 things that cause kennel cough, and she's only vaccinated for 2.
Right. It's like a flu shot.
Yeah. It was even worse than a flu shot. Yeah. But the point is, it's not going to do very much. And so that's really an education disease as opposed to a vaccinate. You can't vaccinate kennel cough away. It won't work.
So with you having so much experience and over a long period of time, did you notice a difference or an increase in things like cancer, or I was even thinking of the cruciate tears or things like that? And do you attribute any of that to things like vaccines or over vaccination, or to what do you attribute?
Food allergies and there's so many things that we see that have become so commonplace that we expect it. We expect dogs to have food allergies. We expect dogs to be itchy. We expect them to have gut problems. We expect them to get cancer. We expect cruciate tears and hip dysplasia.
I mean, I wish I had the answer to your question, Erin. And
I know there's no one answer.
No, there's no one answer. But the thing I've seen is that when I graduated, we were told that the breed that is susceptible to cancer is boxers. Okay, as in, if you see a lump on a boxer, assume it's malignant until you can prove otherwise. But that was about it, right? And other than that, you get a bit cancer in all of them at a certain level. But then, 20 years ago, we started seeing, getting a golden past 9 years is quite a miracle now, because they kept coming up with all these really neat tumors, hemangiosarcoma primarily. And then we're seeing more leukemia. And this is my real big worry. Then we had specific breeds, and Bernese Mountain Dogs comes to mind. And that is, boy, they're prone to some horrible cancers, right? And having an old burner is almost impossible. And also we were seeing osteosarcomas in the large giant breeds and all that stuff. But the incidence of the tumors compared to when I started, I think is way up. But also the severity of the tumors is way up. Okay, so we used to diagnose cancer, but it wasn't that often. And now we're seeing it, and I mean, there's certain breeds that I'm on a lookout all the time, thinking, I wonder, like if I get a golden retriever, I'm going to be palpating the belly a little bit more intensely. I'm going to be listening to the heart more, just in case I could pick something up,
right?
Which wasn't the case way back. But the cause for it, certainly because you've got these certain breeds and even lines in breeds that are prone to some tumors, there's genetics. And so we have genetic issues in our dogs. And the best way to describe that is that, and I'm going to pick on Goldens for a second, there was a huge incidence of eye problems that came up in Goldens. And it was all traced back to one dog that was carrying it, which was used for so much breeding, and his name was Gold Rush. It's actually in Washington State, I think, Kimberly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And anyway, the point is that they sort of all came back. It's not that he was the origin of it. It was just that he happened to be a carrier of it, and then boom, all these eye problems. So what would happen is he would breed a female, you get the puppies, and then 3 generations later, one of those kids is then bred to another distant great grandchild, and boom, the eye problem came up. Okay, and it's a uveitis is what we're talking about. But the point is that is how things get into the breeds. And so then, and I don't think this is the case, but let's assume that gene for the eye problem is linked to a gene that causes hemangiosarcoma. Bingo. That's how it's going to get out there. Okay. So the point is that is how we as breeders as in, dog breeders have been able to manipulate things and create instances where we may see more disease. Is that true? I don't completely know. But when you see so much concentration in breeds, it's kind of like, why do Goldens have this, but Rottweilers don't?
Mm-hmm.
That type of thing, right? So that's one thing. But I also think, and this is the sort of the way the holistic practitioners go, is it's an environmental combination. And that is, we're dealing with food, we're dealing with toxins, which includes vaccines, and also lifestyle. I think that has a bearing too. Yeah. So all those things together are promoting the cancer.
Yeah.
Okay. And we don't, unfortunately, I mean, there's been big studies done on it to find incidence of cancer and things. The newest one that you probably know is the age of sterilization is important. Yes. In terms of when, or the incidence of cancer after that. So that has an effect. And there was a great paper that came out. I just did a blog on it a couple of weeks ago, and what that one was looking at age of sterilization in terms of the breed and the tumor incidence in it. But the thing is, they came out with certain dogs that they said should not be neutered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And it's kind of like,
the one we talked
wow.
about?
Yeah, we were just talking about that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you look at something like that, it's kind of like, wow, we've got, we've got all these things that are having an effect. And all these things are things that we have control over to be able to have an effect on our dogs.
Yeah. So
we have to try and do it right. And the thing that I'd be doing is feeding foods that don't have, and this is the key, cancer in my mind is created by inflammation in the body. I want to feed a food and also direct all my other treatments, whatever they are, so that I'm minimizing inflammation in the body.
Yeah. It's funny because I started with focusing on gut health. That was because of Rodrigo and when he was with me. But after losing him and before that Scout, before that Sydney, it became inflammation, because so many things inflammation was the foundation for so many things that were going wrong. So if it were gut health, it's inflammation. If it's allergies, it's inflammation. If it's cancer, it's inflammation.
Yep, you got it. Yeah.
And it's interesting because I've reduced the number of supplements, because I was trying so hard to just have my dogs live forever by throwing every supplement someone told me about at them. I mean, you should have seen my kitchen counter, 10 years ago. Is insane. But now my dogs get 3 supplements, and all of them, basically, I alternate between them, basically support low inflammation.
Yeah.
And they're doing really good.
Yeah. I think that's a fantastic way to go, Kimberly, because you've honed it down, and you're not following the latest trend, which is another avenue you can get into. Because in a vet hospital, and especially with a new client that would come in, because we tell them, can you bring any medications your dog is on, right? And they come in with this, sometimes an ice chest filled with stuff. Other times it's just a couple of bags, filled with 30 bottles in each bag. It's like, you're giving all that stuff? Yeah. Okay, let's stop.
Yeah.
Because there's more supplement here than you're giving in food. We got a problem here.
I have one question before we wrap up, and I was just curious about your insight on this. One thing that I have found with social media are so many veterinarians who are not fans of, raw feeding or cooking for your dog, or basically anything that is alternative. It's interesting to me that they will comment on posts about these things, but they're not interested in having a discussion. And and I'm open to it. It's like, I don't believe that I'm an expert in anything except for my dogs. And I'm open to different perspectives simply because things that I believed 10 years ago, I don't believe anymore today. And I know what I believe today will change 10 years from now. And every dog that I get, I have to pivot a little to adapt to that dog. So I don't mind having someone who disagrees with what I'm feeding my dogs. I just would love to have them articulate why they disagree. And what I found really interesting is I figure most veterinarians are too busy to be on social media commenting on various posts, but the ones that do have time, I find it interesting that they'll take the time to comment to tell you that you're wrong, but they are not interested in going beyond that. And I don't know if it's like an ego, like, hey, I'm a veterinarian. I went to vet school. I don't have to explain myself to you. Or if it's, I don't understand why they are not able to, or if they just don't have the words to articulate because they haven't been taught these things. So they just know it's wrong, but they don't really know why it's wrong. Yeah.
There's, that's a lot. They know why it's wrong. It's because the institutions have said that it's wrong. Mm-hmm. Okay. In terms of their own research into it, as in, gee, like I've read 14 papers that say that doing this alternative method does not work. No, they haven't done that. Okay. And they don't have time. And it becomes down to a belief system is really what it is. And as you're explaining that, Kimberly, what I was thinking about is, and I can say this as a Canadian, because I look at the current situation there's a company or country down south called the U.S., and I see there's two camps. Either you're pro-Trump or you're against Trump. And the two don't mesh. Similar to the veterinarian you're talking about, I don't think you're going to put the two in a room to have a logical conversation. Mm-hmm. Okay, and that is the problem that we have, and that is you're dealing with a belief system that you're trying to undermine. It's like saying, "Oh, I'm Catholic, you're Hindu," and we can approach it as friends and say, gee, yours is neat. Tell me more about it. Mm-hmm. Or we can say, well, mine's right and yours isn't. Yeah. Okay. And unfortunately, that is where we are with veterinarians. And that is they were trained to this belief system when they went through school. And they were taught by the people who are they're above them, they're professors and everything. And they never lie. So therefore, everything is true. And you graduate with that idea. You really do. And then that is promoted by the companies that are providing services for you, as in you're selling their products. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so, unfortunately, there's not much opportunity for regular veterinarians to get into the alternative world. And that is a concern that I have, period. And that is when I got into it, which was like more 25 years ago or so, for real. A little bit longer now, I guess. I'm getting old. But anyway, back then, there was a fair number of people my age doing that. Mm-hmm. And when I look at it now, I see all the people that are members in the Holistic Veterinary Medical Association. Most of them are gray-haired. And I'm not seeing many young veterinarians that are bringing this thing and learning acupuncture, chiropractic, and things like that, in the numbers that we had years ago. Yeah. So I think we are seeing a shift again. Mm-hmm. And if you go back 30 years ago or 25 years ago, it's like, yeah, we're getting a healthy lot of veterinarians who are going this route. And so, hey, we've got some hope here. And when I finished practice, which was just under 3 years, or just under 3 years ago now, our practice, the purchasers of the practice, turned it conventional within about 3 months, and they fired me. That was the end of my employment. And then when I look at all the practices around, because people are asking me then, which vet do you recommend? Mm-hmm. It's like, there aren't any around here.
Yeah.
They're all very simply, they're all suppliers of prescription dog food.
Right. So don't you have a course called Be Your Own Vet?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, that one's geared for people who want to. It doesn't create veterinarian qualifications. What it does is when you have people who want to take control of the health in their animals, then that is what they come and learn. And so it's just an educational program, so you can learn all these different things. The main thing behind it is that it's got core courses, but the other side is we have 8 meetings every month that are live where I teach something, and then we have the best part, the Q&As, just like we're doing today, actually. But we can delve into topics. But let's say about half the people are pet owners, the other half are pet professionals, and that is they're ones who are wanting to learn more for their services. For example, one is a canine massage person. There's another one who's a dog trainer, another one who teaches canine nutrition. So what they're doing though is and here's a good example. Dog trainers, you have people will take their puppy to a dog trainer and so they can learn how to make it sit, lie down, stay, and all that stuff. But the next thing that same puppy owner is asking the dog trainer is, what food do you recommend?
Right. And a lot of times there's behavior issues that might be linked to a medical condition too, that it's helpful for trainers to have some kind of background in or familiarity.
Yeah. And the flip side is there's a behavior course inside this for the people that aren't dog trainers. So if you're teaching nutrition, because you'll get asked about behavior.
Yeah.
Right. So boom, you've got the answer that way. So that's what that program's for, And if anyone wants information, just go to my website and they'll be able to track me down, and I'm glad to give information.
Yeah,
no problem.
We'll have links to that in the notes as well.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, but that's the way we can do that. And I've also got an ebook I can supply for you if you want, if I can give that to people as well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll be sharing that ebook on my next newsletter.
Oh, wonderful. Perfect.
Well, thank you so much for your time today.
You're very welcome. Thank you, both of you. It's been great being here.